All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this live stream for the Nova Scotia provincial election. I'm Éric Grenier, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and partner in our Numbers podcast, Philippe J. Fournier. Philippe, how are you doing this evening?
Good evening, Éric. It's good to talk with you. We talked this morning. We recorded a special episode for our podcast members. And here we are on the Nova Scotia election live stream, which should be the last election this year, don't you think? It should be, right?
Yeah. Well, aside from some by-elections that are coming up.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But our last live stream, unless there's a federal election call like tomorrow. I'm playing the odds that it won't happen yet. So
Yeah, no, I think we're good for the year. This will probably be our last one. So good evening, everyone. We're seeing you in the comments. And as always, you can leave your comments and your questions, and we'll try to get to them as many as we can through the night. What you're seeing to the left of me is the CBC elections page, which is a nice elections page, which has a nice map and nice colors. Yep. There's a link to it in the show description or the YouTube description, so you can take a look at it if you want to follow along. You can also go check out our two websites. You can do it after the live stream, and you can sign up for our podcast, the Numbers Podcast, which we do every week now. And we had a fun episode out today where we did a live leader resignation draft. Yeah. Who we think is going to resign over the next year. We both think there might be at least one leader who could resign within the next few hours, possibly. But we'll see what's going to happen there. Why we started a bit late. So I wanted to get to this right off the top. The polls closed in almost all of Nova Scotia at 8 o'clock local, so 7 o'clock Eastern. But there was one polling station somewhere in the Eastern Shore riding that opened an hour late. And according to the Elections Nova Scotia law, that poll station had to stay open for an hour longer, and Elections Nova Scotia couldn't report a single result until that poll closed. So what has happened is that the polls closed in every single polling division except one. The people there started counting the ballots. They did not start counting in this one polling division in Eastern Shore at 9 o'clock local, 8 o'clock Eastern. We're kind of expecting a big dump of all the votes that have been counted for the last 47 minutes. So we wanted to come on a little bit before that happened so that we could set up the election a little bit, because it's very possible that within minutes of 13 minutes from now, we could have some winners and some losers. So who are we expecting, Philippe, to be the winners and the losers tonight?
Well, if we go by the polls, and all the polls are listed, 338canada.com/NS, it looks like it will be a PC majority, according to the polls. Of course, we always have to be careful. The question would be how big of a majority, and who gets to finish second. Now, the NDP has had good numbers in the polling data, and we wonder whether the Liberals will survive at all this election. But again, there's quite a bit of variance in the polls, much higher variance than what we've seen in British Columbia, say, where all the pollsters had, two main parties within 3 points, I think. The highest poll for the PCs was Main Street Research at 54%. And they had a poll also from Forum Research. I think it was 47 or 48%? I should have the list in front of me. But it was in the high 40s. So still, it should be a comfortable majority either way. But there is a psychological threshold, I think, for a party that reaches 50% of the vote, which doesn't happen very often in a three-party system like in Nova Scotia. What's your big take tonight? If you had a pre-game show like we're doing right now, what are you watching tonight?
If we had the thing that we're doing right now, yeah, for the PCs, it really is just about how big of a win it's going to be. There is, unless we're either going to have a very predictable outcome or the biggest surprise, the biggest error in the polls that we've ever seen. That's unlikely to happen. Even the worst polls for the PC still usually have them ahead by 20, 25 points. So they're almost certainly going to win big. It's just a question of how big of it's going to be. If they get over 50% of the vote, it would be the first time that they would do it since 1984. PCs under John Buchanan won 50.6% of the vote in 1984. I don't know if they'll ever beat the best ever. The best ever, I looked this up, was in 1925. and the Conservatives got 61% of the vote. So I don't think they're going to do that. But they could set a record because the most seats ever won by a party. Now, the size of the legislature has changed, but the most seats ever won by a party in Nova Scotia is 42.
It's Buchanan?
Yeah,
Is it Buchanan?
it's Buchanan again in 1984. Okay. So 42 seats seems like an achievable threshold for the PCs based on where the polls were.
I would think so too. My final projection had the PCs at an average of 44, with, of course, a confidence interval somewhere between the low 40s and the high 40s. I mean, could they get a really good outing and win 48, 49 seats? Sure, but that would mean a Liberal wipeout and a poor performance from the NDP. So this is the range we're looking at. And obviously we're saying this, and look, maybe the PCs will stumble and barely get to the majority threshold. It's just that when polls are wrong, they're not wrong by 15 points usually. No. Although we had a very interesting fall in polling in Canada, because the polls were really good in British Columbia. They were really good. There were not many of them, but they were really good in New Brunswick. And then obviously we had Saskatchewan, where we kind of thought, Saskatchewan is a tough province to poll. The polls were pretty bad in 2020, and they were mostly bad again this time. So I'm surprised also by the amount of polling we had for Nova Scotia, right?
People were really
Last time around, there was only 2 polls for the whole campaign, and maybe it was a summer campaign. It didn't help. Now, it was the only good news out of the early election call for me was that the election is not in July. Yeah. Anyway,
we got a funny comment from CH, so I had to look it up. So the comment was, do you guys think John A. Macdonald should have stepped aside so the people of Hants East can have an MLA that is under 200 years old? So I looked it up, and I didn't know this, but the incumbent in Hants East is apparently John A. Macdonald. Wow. I don't think it's the same one.
Still
Pretty
rolling,
sure he died 1891. And also, if we're going to get really nerdy about this, the historical John A. Macdonald didn't capitalize the D in his Macdonald name. So
he did not?
He did not. Okay. Don't make that telltale error. So that is, so the PC size of the win is the one thing we're going to be looking at. And then, as you mentioned, also who's going to finish second. Most of the polls have now had, the last polls of the campaign, had the NDP ahead of the Liberals by a few points. Yeah. Enough now that we can say they're probably not in a tie with the Liberals. But because their vote is so concentrated in the Halifax area, they are still pretty likely to win 5, 6, 7 seats in the Halifax area. And that could get them the official opposition role, because my last projections for the Liberals in Nova Scotia had them at 2.
Liberals? The 2?
With the potential of winning 4.
Yeah, my confidence interval went from 0 to 7, but 7 was a long tail projection. I think that's fair. From 0 to 4, I think is the most likely, according to the data we had. And also looking at the results, I mean, this is really a first past the post moment, because the Liberals could get close to a quarter of the vote tonight, right? And imagine you get a quarter of the vote, or almost a quarter of the vote, and you get the risk of getting shut out. No surprise that the Liberals are in Nova Scotia. We're suddenly in favor of electoral reform. So this is always something that you bring up. Like,
don't bring that up. We'll get the proportional representation thing in the comments. For the Liberals, the results I'm going to be looking for. So their lowest share of the vote they ever got was 23.4%. I'm not sure they're going to hit that. And the lowest number of seats they've ever won was 3. Again in 1925. This was a big landslide win for the Conservatives. Wow. So we could see the PCs have their best night potentially since the 80s, maybe even back to the 60s with Robert Stanfield when his last couple elections that they did so well. And we could see the Liberals have their worst night ever.
Yep.
Which, you start to think about it. And I don't want to make broader conclusions, but there's been a couple elections now where the Liberals have had their worst result ever, right? Quebec,
exactly.
Ontario.
BC, they didn't do too well, right?
No. Yeah. They did not finish a DNF. They didn't get there anywhere.
Yeah.
So there'll be a couple things to watch. There's an independent. We don't really know what's going to happen I'll show you that riding on the map. It is in Cumberland North. This is Elizabeth Smith McCrossan, who's the incumbent. She was a PCMLA. She won with a big margin in 2017, 2017. She was booted out of the PC caucus over pandemic restriction stuff. She had opposition to it. She won as an independent in 2021 by a big, big margin.
Yeah.
We don't really know if she's going to keep that vote. She would have to lose a lot of it to lose the seat because she won over 50%. But that's a bit of a question what is going to happen there. And then there was two ridings you mentioned before we were talking about. So one of them is Halifax Atlantic.
Yeah.
So Brendan McGuire is the incumbent, but he was elected as a Liberal pretty comfortably last time. He crossed the floor to the PCs, and he's running as a PC. So are the Liberals going to be able to take that riding back? And then the other one would be in Northside Westmount, which is on Cape Breton Island. And Fred Tilley, again, a Liberal MLA who crossed the floor to the PCs. I'm pretty sure he's the one who just did it, right? Like a week or two before the writ drop. So how will voters react there? Will they follow their MLA over to the new party? That's something I'm going to be watching. Any other ridings you're going to keep an eye on?
Well, you mentioned some of the. I mean, well, of course, the Liberal leader, Yarmouth. I think we know that from the polls, the Liberal leader, Mr. Churchill, doesn't have good personal numbers, but sometimes locally having a leader, obviously, you can have a bonus in there. Because of local effects, but this is something that we should mention with Nova Scotia polling in elections. We didn't have any like regional numbers, right? We had Halifax numbers, and then some very small sample size for Cape Breton, and the rest was rest of Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
So for Miss McCrossan in Cumberland North, we have no data. So. We just go with what we have. I would not be surprised if she loses or if she wins tonight because we haven't seen any data localized and nothing has been leaked. So with the projections, something that I always say on a podcast, you go with the data you have, not the data you wish you had.
Yeah.
I wish we could have some local data, but we don't. And Halifax Atlantic, the Liberal candidate, the Liberal MLA that crossed the floor, won by 30 points last time around in a defeat. So you would think that that Liberal brand would be still strong there, but then the Liberals lost over 10 points provincially since that election. So there's a lot of dynamics, a lot of movement that are, I don't want to say unprecedented, but there's not many precedent for what happened there. I'm not very confident in my projection. Some say that it's easier to project an election when there's a landslide. That's true, but I always focus on the ones I miss, not the ones I get. So I guess we'll
perfection.
See, so.
It's very sad, but that's it with these kinds of elections. We especially see this in Atlantic Canada. It is hard to always get the seat level projections correct, just because a little bit of votes can change the outcome, and also the impact of the local candidate can really be important.
Oh yeah.
One other riding I wanted to mention was Eastern Shore. So this is in the Halifax Regional Municipality. This is the riding. This is the bellwether riding in Nova Scotia. It has voted with the governing party in every election since 1970. So we're talking over 50 years that it has picked the winner. And it's almost certainly going to pick the winner again because Kent Smith, he's the incumbent PCMLA. And I don't know about your projections, but my last expectations was that he'd easily clear 50% of the vote in Eastern Shore. So that bellwether record is likely to continue for a while. Guysborough Tracadie has also picked the winner since 1984, and Lunenburg is the other one, has picked the winner since 1999. And they're all likely going to continue to do that tonight, so the streak will continue. Okay, we're 1 minute from the polls closing.
I'm sorry, did you say Eastern Shore was within Halifax Municipal Region? Because that's a big riding.
The Halifax Regional Municipality is huge. It covers pretty much everything from Eastern Shore to over on this side of Halifax. They're on the other side of the...
Is Lunenburg part of Halifax officially?
No.
Okay, so that's outside. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
All right. The polls are about to close. We're expecting to get a big dump of results from Elections Nova Scotia because of how the counting in almost every single polling division across the province has been ongoing for an hour. And we could have a result soon. Do you want to make an over and under on when we call this election?
Okay, so the record for me in my personal experience was CTV News in the Quebec election in 2022. They called it at 8:08. Vote counting started at 8, and 8 minutes later, they called it. Now, they started counting an hour ago. If we see that huge dump of votes that should come any second now, if we see 30 seats for the PCs, well, we can make a call in a few minutes. But over under, I'll say 8:10. Let's say
8:10. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet that there's going to end up being some sort of snafu, and we're going to end up sitting there for a long time waiting for some results to come in. But hopefully, if that's not the case, we can get it done pretty quick. So we will see. So the polls closed an hour ago. The poll in this Mushaboom, I think is the name of it. I think that was the name of it. It's a polling division in Eastern Shore. Closed an hour, or opened an hour later, so closed an hour later, which means we all had to wait. But everybody has been counting for an hour, so Elections Nova Scotia will get the results up as soon as possible. Let's hope. So, if anybody has any questions, you can leave them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. And you can check out again our podcast. We got links to them down below. So, what do you think? What does your gut say? Does your gut tell you anything different than what your projections said?
So the usually, and I know it's not a golden rule, perfect rule, but usually that conservative parties can sometimes be underestimated. Not by much, within the margin of error, but it's on the higher bracket. So if we look at the final polls, I have it here. Now, final polls for Nova Scotia. So for the PCs, 47, 51, 54, 48, 51, and Narrative Research had 44. So between 44 and 54. Would you say it's likely that the PCs do get over 50?
I feel like they will. And
I feel like it's possible, right?
We do have
it's
some first results already in, and they are at 55.
All right.
So we might as well just be done now. 53, so it's starting to count up pretty fast. So the PCs are ahead in 14. The NDP is ahead in 4.
There you go.
Liberals in 1. Independent is 1. It's 8:02, 9:02 Atlantic time. So we'll see how much longer we have to go before we can actually call this one. So it'll be easier, I think, as the night goes on to highlight the ridings that aren't PC. So why don't we do that? First one up in Cape Breton, we got Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier, which is right now for the Liberals, for the NDP. They're ahead by about 100 votes. That is a riding that they held last time, so kind of expected that they could hold it again. Elizabeth Smith McCrossan has a big lead early on.
Yep.
8 out of 43 polls counted in Cumberland North, so no surprises there. And when we go into the Halifax area, the NDP is ahead in Dartmouth North, Dartmouth South, Halifax Needham, Halifax Chebucto, Halifax Armdale, and Fairview Clayton Park. No surprises. The Liberals are leading in Bedford South. It's only 3 polls counted, so it's not a big lead. But
it's a plausible one too for the Liberals.
Yeah, that's not a surprising one to see as Liberal. But apart from that, looks like we got what we expected in Eastern Shore. Ken Smith leading with 71% of the vote there, so no surprise. The PC's already at 29. Yeah. What's the majority threshold? It's 55, so it's 27.
It's 28.
28. CTV already just declared it. 3 minutes. Well, I mean, it's 3 minutes after the polls closed, but it's not. It's actually
an hour and 3 minutes. Yeah.
Do you want to see enough, or do you want to keep some suspense here?
Okay. Good night, folks. It's been great. No, of course not. You know what? Let's wait a little bit.
Let's let it breathe. Let's let it breathe just a little bit.
I'm guessing that they have local results. They can, they have a team on the field. CTV, it's Bell Media. They should have resources. We're just looking at the page from CBC, right? But okay, so I see 40,000 votes counted already, at least right there. 60% for the PCs, obviously higher than what the polls are saying, but it's already right there in the projections that we had that the PCs should win a majority. So it's not a surprise. I mean, we're not heroes by calling it right now. Because
you're right. We should be responsible and We know, like, the markets could move based on what we say tonight. I'm sure people in Tokyo are watching right now to see what's going to happen, and we don't want to make anybody lose any money. But it's also when the results come in and they're exactly what you kind of expect,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And right so far, as I mentioned, when I went through the ridings that currently aren't PC, no big surprises. The NDP leading in Sackville-Cobequid, which are ahead by 2 votes.
2 votes.
But that would be a bit of a surprise. But apart from that, they only got 1 Liberal. We don't have any results yet from Yarmouth. Do we have any from Northside, Westmount? Yes. Looks like Fred Tilley's off to the races, 68% already. So he's doing all right. And Sydney member 2 hasn't reported yet, so we were waiting on that. And Halifax Atlantic, 63% for Brendan McGuire. So
Okay. Yeah.
seems like the voters are following his lead there. So we got
Wow.
30 leading for the PCs, 8 for the NDP, 1 for the Liberals, though the ones that they are really banking on haven't reported yet. And Elizabeth Smith McCrossan seemingly going to get reelected, though there is only 8 of 43 polls reported, and maybe some of those polls are in the areas where she's particularly popular, but would be surprising if these results were overturned. So
Well, you also would think, I mean, with such a big lead, would the Conservatives really pour that many resources in Cumberland North?
Yeah.
Right? They don't need it, right? When you lead by this much, you can afford to say, okay, this is not worth our time, right? So, that's why I would not be surprised if she wins. She had the big margin. And what did she have? I think it was 54% of the vote
something like
last
that,
time
yeah.
around. So at some point, you just go, okay, it's if this election was on a knife's edge, perhaps you really want to go to that independent where clearly there's many conservative voters out there. But yeah, it's not.
look, it's 8:07. Let's beat that record, and let's call it right now. Are you ready to say that we've seen enough, that this will be a PC majority government?
We've seen enough. Yes, the PC win a second straight majority in Nova Scotia. Not surprising.
No.
And they beat the federal. This is one of the reasons why they went early, right? They wanted to beat the federal, and they did. And not sure we can call official opposition, but the NDP is in a good position right now, as we thought they would be. So
Yeah. So let's take another look at the map, the ridings right now. We were talking about Yarmouth. 21 polls reporting out of 40. And Zach Churchill is behind. He's behind by 121 votes. It's still pretty close.
it's close.
But yeah, that could be something to watch as more things are counted. We see that the map is starting to light up as the CBC decision desk is already counting electing some of these candidates. Sydney member 2, Derek Monbourquette, is ahead by 39 votes. Boy, if the Liberals end up winning 3 or 4 seats with a combined total of 100 vote margin, that would be something. Timberley prospect Ian Rankin. Oh, I didn't even realize that he was still around.
Yeah, he's still there. Yeah, he's still there.
I didn't realize
he's one
that.
of the
That's
2
really
seats.
rare.
He's one of the 2 seats that that are barely liberal
Yeah.
in my model. So yeah,
111 votes for Ian Rankin. And Bedford South, Braden Clark is ahead by 23 votes, only a few reporting. But so far, no huge surprises from these, right? Because if we would have said which Liberal ridings, I had Bedford South as one of their, maybe they could hold on to it.
Yeah.
Timberley Prospect, Sydney member 2 were the other ones, and Yarmouth, which right now is still trending toward Nick Hilton, although he's only ahead by 105 votes. So that will be something to watch.
Miss Chender is in Dartmouth South, I think.
Yes.
North? No,
Yeah.
South.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
she's
she's at
leading big.
72%. Yeah.
She's doing fine. Okay.
She's doing fine. The NDP's ahead in Cole Harbour, only by 1 vote. That would be a bit of a surprise if they pulled that one off. And wanted to check as well how Tim Houston is doing. So
Pictou or Pictou. You said.
Pictou.
Pictou.
So Pictou West looks like it's going to stick with the PCs, as we'd expect. Is one of the strongest regions for the PCs. And we got no results yet from Pictou East, where Tim Houston is. So it could be still in jeopardy. We don't know.
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, even
Yeah.
though I'm
No, I
standing.
think
Yes,
you'll be
okay.
all right.
So
All right, so we got 36 seats right now for the PCs, 8 for the NDP, 3 for the Liberals. And the ones that are waiting to report, Glace Bay Dominion, that was one that was worth keeping an eye on.
yeah, that was a close NDP-PC
Yeah.
projection. Interesting. Yeah.
Pictou East, going to go Conservative. Colchester North, going to go PC. Sackville, Uniacke, maybe. Could be worth watching. Bedford Basin, that would be another one that maybe the Liberals would kind of try to hold on to. Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, almost certainly going to stick with the NDP. And Clare would be probably a PC pickup, so we'll wait to see. So, maybe we're looking at...
We're beating the record here. You said the record was 42?
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
8 NDP, 3
37,
Liberal, 1 Independent. That's 12.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's in the cards.
That would be 43. Yeah, it's possible.
But 8 for the NDP would be a decent result for them. I mean, they got 6 seats last time, 7 in 2017, 7 in 2013.
In the context that this is a blue wave and the NDP appears, at least in seats, at least to be resisting that wave. So Liberals paying a price. Although, I mean, we have to be careful. The vote total here, I mean, there's many seats not reporting in Halifax. This should bump the NDP up a bit. Yeah. And the PC's down. PC's at 57%. I'm expecting around 50. If they had 57%, they would have really beat all of their polls. So let's wait.
Yeah. Thank you, Cassandra, for a pronunciation correction. Uniacke for... Uniacke for Sackville, Uniacke.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's one there. What else did I see? A joke here by Nick that he'll stay in the blue areas because he can't find a place to park in the orange and red areas, which might be a bit more of an urban rural comment. Really insightful observation there by Nick.
They should remove the bike lanes. It would flow the traffic, right? Flow the traffic.
That'll be for the next majority. That's for Tim Houston's
okay.
next majority. Don't worry about it. He'll get there. So really no surprises so far. We got 57% of the vote for the PCs, 19 for the NDP, 22 for the Liberals. How are the Greens doing? 0.9. All right.
Getting 1% for the Greens would be good. They have half a slate. Right, so it's bad because they couldn't have a full slate, but getting 1% is, you don't have the candidates. So I'm sure many people would have loved to vote for the Greens. Well, many people, a few percent, but still, yeah.
Potentially double the amount that we'll get to, and that's
easily.
Yeah. So Yarmouth is really the one that I think we're going to have to keep an eye on. So right now it is 1,310 votes for Nick Hilton of the PCs and 1,114 for Zach Churchill, the Liberal leader. So he's behind by nearly 200 votes. And they counted half. So this could take a little while till we know whether Zach Churchill is going to continue as an MLA or not.
Doesn't look good, though. Yeah,
it doesn't look good. I mean, his predecessor, Ian Rankin, is leading by 110 votes. So he still might hold on. I guess he could have the job back if he wants it.
He could. I guess he could, right? I mean, there are some few comebacks in history. The thing is, with Zach Churchill also, is I know throughout my years of covering politics, there are also some, what's the English word? Like pity defeats, right? Like, just get him out of there, right? I mean, the scenario where the Liberal leader would be the only Liberal left, and then what do? You fire him? you take them down. So we don't have one MLA and no leader. So in a bad defeat, sometimes you just you buy out and you do something else, or you try to rebuild. So it's going to be a tough 4 years for the Liberals. I think the numbers indicate that much. Do you really want to stick around? Maybe not. So
yeah. So we got 7 ridings that are still left to report. Why don't we expand our look a little bit, because we know what the result's going to be. We're still waiting to confirm who will form the official opposition, whether Zach Churchill will win his seat. But we got a question from Gabriel, who asked whether the Conservatives could win the by-election in Halifax that's coming up. So the feds have to call a by-election in Halifax by March 2nd. So if the government survives till March 2nd, there will be one more by-election. That's the only one aside from the one that's happening on the 16th in BC. I think that it seems more likely that the NDP could win Halifax. It'd be a surprise if the Conservatives could win Halifax, especially when you look at these results where the NDP has got 63% in Halifax Needham. They've got 48% in Halifax Chebucto. In Armdale, Armdale's a close one, 6-vote lead for the NDP there. And in Fairview Clayton Park, they're ahead by 130 votes or so. We haven't heard yet from Halifax Citadel, which is a pretty safe NDP riding. And then the Dartmouth are in the Dartmouth Cole Harbour riding, so they're not in Halifax. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, okay, so let's just look at the transpose result. In 2019, Liberal win it, 10-point lead over the NDP. The Conservatives were fourth behind the Greens in Halifax. 2021, we know it wasn't a good election for the Greens. The Conservatives went from 12 to 13%. So even if they triple their score, they would have trouble winning. So they should have a good candidate. They should try to find one. The vote division between the vote split between the Liberals and NDP could offer up a possibility. But if I'm Poilievre, I'm not losing any sleep over Halifax. You really, really don't need this one.
Yeah.
And the NDP should be in good position to win with the Liberals so we can oppose.
Yeah. So we'll see what's going to happen there. I am curious to see how the NDP's vote holds up in Halifax, because in this campaign, so we'll see, like, there's still, like I said, Halifax Citadel hasn't even come in yet, and that's going to be a strong one for the NDP. They're at 20% right now in the polls, or in the counting. Assuming that goes up as more of the Halifax vote gets counted, it seems likely they're going to do better than last time. So last time they had 20.9% of the vote. The election before that, they had 21.5. So anything above 22 means that they made some progress over the last few years. And I find that interesting that the NDP, which seemed to have been losing steam over the last few elections, ever since Darrell Dexter was defeated in 2013, that they are coming back in Nova Scotia as the alternative to the PCs. Whether that is going to end up being like Ontario, where they're there for one election and then maybe two, I guess, two. But will they retain that position as the alternative to the government? We'll see. But it seems to have been a good campaign from Claudia Chender. Her personal ratings were pretty high, not as high as Houston's overall, but her numbers got better over the campaign. Churchill's got worse. And I think we're seeing the results of that. We'll check in on Yarmouth again. It hasn't counted more, still 24 out of 40. So we're still waiting on more out of that. So, but I mean, this map looks a lot like what we're kind of expecting to see in the next federal election in Nova Scotia.
Yes, lots of blue, we saw some federal numbers in the provincial polls that were released during the Nova Scotia campaign, and again there was no big surprise. The Conservatives were leading, so this is the pendulum that swings, right? Again, we mentioned this in our recent episode when the Newfoundland and Labrador Liberals won provincially. In the fall of 2015, there were 7 Liberal governments in Canada, plus the federal, right? And there were pieces written about how is the Conservative movement shattered. This is the swing of the pendulum. Now, obviously, there are some bad Liberal defeats that are irreversible. BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, those Liberal parties are gone. They're not coming back. But it's not that progressive parties aren't there. They exist. It's just that they're not Liberal branded. Now, I had the comment that Nova Scotia, the map that we have of Nova Scotia, is looking like a Western province. This is lots of blue, especially in the rural areas, lots of orange downtown, and barely a speck of red here and there. And we haven't seen that in Atlantic Canada. Well, maybe in PEI, but replace NDP by the Greens. But we haven't seen that much in Atlantic Canada. So,
it is interesting to see this rural-urban divide accentuate itself into Atlantic Canada. We saw that in New Brunswick as well, I would say. Because you think back to when Dexter won in 2009. The NDP won seats in in Pictou, if I'm not mistaken. They won seats in rural Nova Scotia. The map had a lot of orange in Halifax, but it had orange in the mainland. But it seems almost impossible to imagine the NDP coming back to win in Hants or to win in King County or places like that. It does seem like our politics are getting almost more similar, federal and provincial and regionalized in terms of that urban-rural divide, which is interesting to see. And I think that is probably bad news. Especially, it wasn't the case in New Brunswick, but it is bad news, I think, for the Liberals in general, because when the rural areas move to the PCs and we see the urban areas, the urban cores go to the NDP, the Liberals get squeezed out in a lot of these.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at the three they're in right now that they're leading in. So it's Timberlea Prospect, Bedford South, and Sydney Member 2. Aside from Sydney Member 2, which I think is actually in this, like the city of Sydney, these are all kind of, well, there's two I mentioned. They're like suburban ridings.
Yeah.
And they're going to be lucky to hold on to them because Rankin is ahead by less than 200 votes.
Bedford South
points.
is tied.
Bedford
247, 247. Yeah, it's red by default.
Yeah,
but
it's not even red. So the Liberals are at 2.
Yeah.
They're at, like I mentioned, the worst ever result was 3 seats in 1925.
Our projection looks pretty good right now.
I don't think
I'm not saying that's all that matters, but much of that, so yeah. By the way, I just looked it up. You mentioned the 2009 NDP victory in Nova Scotia. It was an NDP sweep of Pick 2. Pick 2 West, Pick 2 Center, and Pick 2 East, all won by the NDP and by big margins. This is not even close to being in the cards right now. So,
No.
yeah.
It is remarkable, because look, Pictou West, 74% of the vote for Marco McLeod. Pictou Center, 68% of the vote. And this is like the urban riding. This is like New Glasgow. And they're at 68%. And no results yet for Tim Houston. We don't know if he's safe. We don't know. We can't. There's no facts in the future, right? So
hang on. Okay, Tim Houston. Last time he had 69.7% of the vote. Does he get 75? It's tough when you get there. You hit a ceiling at some point, but
yeah, you do. Yeah. Churchill would like to be hitting a ceiling. Hopefully, he hasn't, for his sake, hit that ceiling already, because he's at 44% and Nick Hilton's at 52%. We got one more poll counted, so it's starting to slow down there in Yarmouth.
He's done.
You think he's done?
Pity. It's.
Well, he's done either way.
This is a lot of votes.
He's done either way.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a good result for him. 9 right now for the NDP.
It's a good result.
Yeah, I did have them getting as much as 11, I think. But so right now
Plus Citadel's coming. Right?
Citadel's going to come, so maybe they'll get 10 seats.
10. Wow.
Yeah, they haven't been double digits since they formed government. So that would be a bit of a comeback for them. But yeah, right now they're ahead in Dartmouth North, Dartmouth South. Sackville Cobequid is still pretty close. Fairview Clayton Park, not as close. Halifax Armdale, pretty close. Halifax Chebucto, that should be fine for them. They're ahead pretty far. And Halifax Needham, way ahead there. And Cole Harbour, that's still just 1 vote. So it's hanging on by a thread in some of these. They'll be lucky, I think, if they hold on to win 10. And then they're ahead in Cape Breton Center, Whitney Pier, they're still ahead there. Kendra Coombs by a decent amount, so we'll see. But for Derek Momborquette in Sydney Member 2, he is leading by... what is that? 44 votes. And we'll just check again on the Liberals. Rankin ahead by 200. He might hold on. And Bedford South. Now it's a 10-vote lead for Clark. And then in Yarmouth, I don't think we had another poll, so it's still Churchill behind. We're still waiting to see on results from Clare. So that is a Liberal incumbent. So... who knows? We'll wait and see what happens there, though it seems likely based on everything else that this will go to the PCs.
Got a question here from Riley. I want to ask you, because I think you know this. Éric, do you know what's the highest percentage result is for a candidate in an individual riding in modern day?
Oh my God, in the modern day.
Federally, I think the Conservatives had a few above 80%, but trying to think of
I'm trying to think if maybe
like rural Alberta had 80%, but provincially, you would think that you would have the occasional 85 or 90.
I do think in the last few elections in Newfoundland we have seen someone get like 89.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've seen ever a 90. I mean, there has been elections in the past where, you know, it's like a by-election for a leader and none of the other parties run anybody.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
of
like a
course.
communist runs and they get like 3%, but a literal communist. And, but yeah, I think I've seen an 89. I just don't know if I've seen a 90. So if anybody can think of a 90,
I am looking
let
this
us
up
know.
right now. Can I? Okay, so Humber East in the 07 Newfoundland election, 84. 87 for Daniel Williams, 87.9 actually. So Daniel Williams, who was premier, obviously, a very popular premier for a while, had 88% of the vote. Above, that's the thing. Above that, it's like when you know, there's always a few people that it's the bell curve, right? There's even in a riding where it's almost unanimous, you will have some people that are just,
Yeah.
I'm not going with these people.
Kyle in the comments found in Burgeo La Poile, I don't know how they pronounce it in Newfoundland, 96.5.
Oof, wow. Okay.
That's a mandate.
I just found us 100%. Buena Vista South. It's acclaimed. Roger Fitzgerald was acclaimed.
Claimed is not
so
100%. He got 0% of the vote. There was a question, we should try to answer it. Tara Thiel says, as a non-Nova Scotian, can someone explain why the PCs seem to be so super popular? I think it's a question of the PC brand in Nova Scotia especially is much more moderate than elsewhere. So they have been able to get lots of support from centrist liberals. They got support from conservatives. They are coming in after a liberal government that was voted out largely on the issue of healthcare. There does seem to be the perception that the PCs have worked to try to address some of the issues there. But I think it's just largely a government that hasn't made a big fuss about things, that hasn't caused too many controversies or have been too ideological about things. And I think it has just worked for them. Tim Houston seems like I don't know how to express it. Just like a leader that's not going to make you real angry. Maybe he's not going to make you fall in love with him. But right. And I think that after a time in office, often you see that for that second term, people sometimes just want to continue as things are going. But they've just found a good formula of keeping people on side, people keeping happy enough. And as we've seen with Doug Ford in Ontario, ensuring that the opposition remains pretty closely divided.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty key. I mean, it's always good if you can get 56% of the vote, which is where they are right now. But you look at that NDP and that Liberal number, they're almost identical. 21.9 for the Liberals right now, 20.6 for the NDP.
Repeat Ontario.
Yeah.
Yep.
If the PCs manage to keep those two parties tied like that, they can afford to lose a lot more than the amount of vote that they're gaining. Right now at 55.6. Now, again, we're still waiting, I think, on some Halifax results, but that would be the best result since Robert Stanfield, 1963, had 56% of the vote.
Wow. That's a good comparison to get, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're a Tory in Nova Scotia, you can't really do much better than Robert Stanfield.
That's right.
In his four or five elections that he won. With more votes every time. We finally have some results in Halifax Citadel, and the NDP's leading there as expected. Do we have not a lot of results? Yeah, there's only 5 of 50 polls in Halifax Needham, 5 of 39 in Chebucto. So I think it's likely the NDP vote is going to go up as more votes are counted. So the PCs might struggle to maintain that 56%, but I'm curious to see if the NDP does move ahead of the Liberals in the popular vote before the night is over.
Bedford Basin. I had a close race, 3-way race, but going to the PCs and no results there so far. Okay, that's interesting. Clayton Park West, is that a surprise?
I wouldn't say that's a surprise, especially when it's a three-way
No,
race.
it's close. Yeah, it's close. Okay.
It
yeah.
seemed like it was going to be a three-way race.
Yeah.
There's no incumbent. That is a really interesting one. 35.9% for the PCs, 33.3% for the NDP, 30.8% for the Liberals.
Yep.
That is a three-way race. I'm not sure if we have that many more.
And the Liberals getting squeezed out here. Like literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
The typical example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm trying to see if there's any other three-way races around. Not really seeing any. Halifax Atlantic has been projected to be won by Brendan Maguire. So
I was asked by many readers about this. How do you project a seat that has so many unknowns? And I go with the numbers, and we'll see. I had the PCs winging it. Sorry, my English is tired tonight. But not by this margin. So overperformance. I guess the local MLA, Mr. What's his name? Maguire, his name.
Yes.
He made a good bet then. So,
followed the lead, and same thing happening in Northside Westmount, where the PC Fred Tilley is also declared to have been elected. Still no results from Glace Bay Dominion, which is an interesting one. Pictou East, I mean, that's Houston's riding. Would be nice to see some results. Waiting for more from Bedford Basin, which could be kind of riding that the PCs are going to try to win. Sackville Uniacke, that's a PC incumbent, so almost certainly going to remain that way. And Clare, a riding that the PCs would be expecting to pick up from the Liberals. I'm guessing there's a decent amount of Acadians there, considering that the two candidates are LeBlanc and a Robichaud.
Profiling. Well, it's fair. It's fair.
We can profile. We can profile our own people. And Elizabeth Smith McCrossan has been declared elected in Cumberland North. That is actually really fascinating. 60.7% of the vote for an independent.
She increased her share.
But she must have gotten vote from... Okay, because in the last... Do you have the results in front of you from Cumberland North?
I'll pull them up because I want to know. So what were you going to say?
The results from last time.
Yeah.
So she got 53, 54?
She had 54. The Liberals had 32. NDP 7 and PC 7.
PC 7, right?
Yeah.
So she took all of the PC vote, almost all of it, that she had before, and brought it with her as an independent. She's increased her vote share, but so have the PCs. So did Liberals and New Democrats make a strategic choice to get behind the PC, or did they make a strategic choice to get behind Smith McCrossan? What is the story there? I find that very interesting.
I think it's something that you just mentioned a few minutes ago. Like it is the case for many Atlantic provinces. I don't want to overgeneralize, but we know that the progressive conservatives in Nova Scotia, they are conservatives, but they are moderates, right? They don't rile up too much people. They don't have this Reform Party attitude that can be a turnoff for many people. And so when you consider that there are two MLAs that were elected Liberals by pretty good margins that crossed the floor and won as PCs, could you see something like that at a federal level right now? I'm pretty sure the answer is no, right? Maybe you could pick out a few names, but there isn't that much distance between the PCs and the Liberals in Nova Scotia. There is, obviously, but it goes through a cycle. The polarization is not as acute. Now, obviously, right now, the Liberals are in shambles, and so you can say that we have blue rural areas and orange downtowns, so maybe this polarization is coming back. But, so it looks like many Liberal voters went PCs this time. They had 36% of the vote last time. Now they're hovering around 20, 21, 22. That's 15 points that the Liberals have lost, and it looks like most of those points went to the PCs. Yeah,
it looks like it's going to be like that. Pictou East, we got our first results. Tim Houston with 75% of the vote.
75.
So he wasn't in danger. We were speculating before that we didn't know. It's good to have waited. It's important to do the work. We're still waiting on a couple other ridings. How is that possible after an hour and a half that the polls have closed? How about Yarmouth? We got one more poll that counted, and Zach Churchill is still behind by about 211 votes.
He's done.
Philippe is calling him defeated. You've heard it here first, folks. But Bedford Basin. So this could be. It's probably a PC win, but that would be one. So that could bump them up to 39. Sackville, Uniacke, they're probably going to win because they're the incumbent there. Although interestingly, the Liberal candidate is the former Green Party leader, Thomas Trappenberg. So that would put them up to 40. If they win Clare, that would put them at 41. And if they can take Glace Bay Dominion, and they're the incumbent there, so they probably should, that would put them at 42. So matching John Buchanan's 42 seat record from 1984 is still in the cards. And with some of the close ridings, it's a 52 vote lead for the NDP in Sackville Cobequid, 78 votes for the Liberals in Sydney member 2. Although I think who's second in that one? I think is it the NDP? No, it's the PCs. Okay. And 73 vote lead for the NDP in Halifax Armdale. So if those end up flipping and the other seats go to the PCs, they could end up at 45. So they are I think that they'll get up to 40 for sure. But will they get much higher than that? So kind of an overperformance for the NDP right now at 10.
Yeah. I mean, it's early, so we'll see. But so people know, my projection had the NDP at 8 seats and the Liberals at 2. So and one independent, obviously. So either way, I think the average of polls will lead to a pretty good projection. Now we have to be careful. I see that in Ian Rankin as writing, very few votes have been counted. So Timberley Prospect could still flip. But right now, 2 Liberal, I think, is what we expected. The NDP, I think we can call it now, will form the official opposition.
Yes.
It's pretty obvious.
I think we might as well call that.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, because the NDP are going to win the 2 in Dartmouth. They're going to win at least these 3 in Halifax, or maybe a 4th with Halifax Armdale.
When was the last time the NDP was the official opposition? 06?
It was in 06, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. At that point, the Liberals were on the downtrend, and the PCs were still the government.
It was a minority.
Their best 2 results were in 2006 and 2009. They're not going to match that's for sure, because that was 20 seats in 2006 and 35% of the vote. They're not getting that. But a worst ever performance for the Liberals by every measure, number of seats, number of votes, or share of votes, very possible. They're right now at 21.8% of the vote. Their worst ever was in 1984, 23.4%. And their worst ever seat result was 3 in 1925. But what's really interesting about the fact that it was 1984? What else was happening in 1984?
I'm pretty sure there was a federal landslide in 1984. Yeah.
And it was a PC one.
Yep.
John Turner was the Liberal leader, but it was a lot of...
After Trudeau era.
After people taking their frustrations out on Pierre Trudeau. I don't think that's a coincidence that we're talking about 1984 as the last precedent for the Nova Scotia election. Now, New Brunswick just a month ago breaks the narrative, but that's an exception for every rule, right?
I think the narrative is more incumbents during the pandemic are getting defeated, and the first one to do that was Tim Hewson in 21. So,
right,
continuity here. I want to talk about the polls here a second, Éric.
Okay.
Because how many votes are counted? So I see polls. So half of the polls have been reporting.
Yeah.
The NDP is very efficient, isn't it? Right? They're at 10 seats right now, 21% of the vote. 21 would be below their worst poll in the final stretch. They had, I'm reading here the final stretch of polls. NDP, 27, 25, 25, 28, 24, 28, and Cardinal Research had them at 20. Now, it could still go up with more votes than Halifax, but the NDP is underperforming in votes right now and doing okay in seats. Who needs proportional representation, right? They're happy with this. Well, they got 20% of the votes with about 20% of the seats, so I guess it's fair.
Correction, I just saw from Kyle, and I think he's right. The 23.4% the Liberals had was in 2006. It wasn't in 1984 for the Liberals. Okay. So maybe you can check that for me. But yes, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it does make more sense that it would be in 2006 rather than 1984.
Let me pull
but it's
this
possible.
up.
Actually, I'm not sure. Check the 1984
Well,
Nova Scotia election.
the thing is, Kyle is rarely wrong. So, okay, '06, the Liberals had 23.4.
Yeah, okay. All right. It was
And
2006 that the Liberals had their worst vote result, 1984.
in 1984,
Or in 2006, yes.
they had 31%. It was a bad defeat, but they still had 31% of the vote.
All right.
And Alexa McDonough was leader of the Nova Scotia NDP back then. Man, she was in politics.
She was the first. She was the first woman to lead a major, either provincial or federal party in the country that like contested seats and won seats and stuff like that.
Wow.
I know. I think the record holder is actually Thérèse Casgrain. But that was like the Quebec CCF, and I think they got like 2 votes. So I don't think it really counts. But I mean, to all respect to Miss Casgrain. But yeah, Alexa McDonough was the first woman to lead a major party in the history of the country.
I mean, testing your memory. Okay. Would you know what was the riding of Miss McDonough?
She was a Halifax riding.
Yep.
Was she Halifax Citadel?
No.
Chebucto?
Chebucto is the right answer. Right. Good job.
All right.
I knew it was Halifax. I didn't know more than that. But
so we were talking about the NDP and the Liberals. So right now, there's only a 553 vote gap between the Liberals and the NDP. So it's more that NDP vote is being counted in Halifax. It does seem like the NDP is going to overtake the Liberals in the popular vote, which is what the polls suggested would happen. And just looking now, the Liberals are behind in Bedford South. So right now they're ahead in 2 ridings.
Yeah.
Timberley Prospect, and they're still ahead in Sydney Member 2. That one's getting pretty close to being completed, but it is only 100 and...
Yeah, it's close.
Not even 100. It's 94 votes. So...
Okay, so the next Nova Scotia election it's scheduled for July 29. Is that correct? Because the fixed election date law says July.
Yeah.
And I think it's 4 years after. So
they should change it. Maybe just change it to November or do something.
Change it to November. November is nice. Yeah, exactly. We know that in October 28th, we will have 2, maybe 3 elections because of fixed election date law. I'm not sure BC's is going to go that long. But the other 2, so anyway.
JP Power sent us a nice note on the comments.
Oh,
so
wow. Thank you. Thank you, JP. Appreciate that.
Yeah, so we're going to, I guess we're going to wait for a little bit longer. We said that we would probably go until 9 o'clock. Hopefully, it would be nice to have a result in Yarmouth. I mean, he's still behind by 6 points now, and it's a gap of 200 votes. There's only 9 polls remaining for Zach Churchill. The decision might be made for him.
Yeah, he's done.
Yeah.
He's done.
Yeah. He might not have to.
He's done, and I'm sure he could be at peace right now. There's this sentiment at some point. I mean, this is a very hard job, and the people, the voters sometimes are really hard. The media is really hard on politicians. When they lose, many of them that I talked to, they said, okay, you're sad and you're hurt, but then you let the evening go on, and then you're relieved. You're like, okay, I did my best. I'm going to do something else now. This wasn't for me. It's over, right?
Yeah, but I think he's been a Liberal for a while.
Yeah, but it's, he doesn't have a seat. If he loses, doesn't have a seat, then it's really hard to be a seatless leader, right?
Yeah.
In a party that has seats, they should hope. But
we had a question from Jared. Could Canada go to the polls before January 20th?
Well,
I mean, technically, yes.
Yeah.
The minimum amount of time for an election is 36 days.
36 days, yeah.
And it doesn't really matter when those 36 days. It's not like there's a statutory holiday and it bumps it to 37 or whatever. So technically, I guess they could call an election in the next. They'd have to do it next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think
it's not going to happen, but it's still interesting. I mean, and Chantal Hébert discussed this, I think it was last week, in one of her columns or a chronique, that if there was ever a good reason to go to the polls early, this is it, right?
Right.
You have to. I mean, Trump is you saw all the news today. It was covered wall-to-wall news coverage of the threat of
Tariffs.
of terrorists, because threats is what Trump does all the time. So that's how he works, rightly or wrongly. So, but if I mean, would the NDP agree to this? Or the Bloc? Well, the Bloc would go, but
Well, the Liberals, they don't have they can go visit the GG any day they want.
But they can, but they won't.
No, I don't think they will. They seem to have a plan not to do it soon. They have a GST thing. They have checks coming out. They're not planning on an election anytime soon. So the answer is yes, but they probably won't. No, I don't think so. The last time we had an election over the holidays was the 2005 to 2006 election, which was not called. It was forced. The Liberal government was defeated. That's right. And that long campaign, the holiday season probably buried the Liberals, because going into Christmas in 2005, Liberals were ahead in the polls. After New Year's, I mean, there was stuff happened. There was a Zaccardelli thing with Ralph Goodale. But after New Year's, the Conservatives were ahead, and they never gave up that lead. And
you imagine that many people around the turkey or in family gatherings, they talked politics, and they said, okay, 13 years of the Liberals, that's enough. You try to avoid that if you're the incumbent. So
we have a funny comment from John Way. He says, breaking news, Zach Churchill announces he's not resigning until December 2nd, just because you didn't pick him to resign.
People, we had so much fun today in our special episode for our members. Go check it out. It's worth it. You get, if you sign up to be a member of our podcast, you get bonus content. You get access to our Discord. And the bonus content this month, we did a leaders resignation draft. So basically all the leaders throughout the country that are not interim leaders of parties that have seats in their legislature, we excluded also the territories. So provincial and federal. And we had a draft of who's going to resign or be forced to resign in 2025. And the thing is, we picked 6 each. That's a total of 12. So you already have to scrape the bottom at some point and be imaginative of who's going to resign. And I didn't listen to it back, but it was a blast to do. We had a lot of fun. Go check it out. We did not pick Zach Churchill because we said the date starts on December 1st, right? Yeah. It's from December 1st to December 1st, and we said there's no way he lasts until December 1st.
So, I mean, it seems likely that he will be done tonight. But as you said,
you'll be very interested when you pick Daniel Smith in the second round. I must say I was pretty confused.
I did not, or did I? Or did I? No, we're not going to. This is just a little detail I enjoy. So the riding of Halifax Citadel, which is being called for the NDP, Lisa LaChance, the incumbent there, has 50% of the vote. She's going to return to the legislature. It's Halifax Citadel Sable Island. Okay. Now, Sable Island is this island way out over here.
Oh, that's the one, huh?
With the horses. Yeah. I don't think anybody lives on the island. I think there might be like a lighthouse keeper or something. It's like a tourist destination where you go and there's horses that are on the island. And the horses voted for the NDP.
Nobody lives there?
I don't think so.
People, I mean, is that true? Okay.
Look it up. I'm pretty sure at most they might have like a lighthouse keeper, that kind of thing.
The lighthouse keeper has to live there. Hang on.
Okay, but then like if there's one voter, we'll know how they voted. It's not fair. Maybe they combine that poll with like one in Halifax. Island. But I just find it funny that
There's no street view. There's no street view.
No, there's no street view. Then it shows that no one lives on it. There's no street view. But I just find it funny that Elections Nova Scotia wants to make sure that the sovereignty of Nova Scotia over Sable Island is reiterated, even on election night, that it's Halifax Citadel and also Sable Island, which is actually closer to probably these ridings on the East Coast. So
population. 0.
Told you.
6 to 25 personnel from meteorological services are stationed there, but there's 0 stable or permanent inhabitants. So there's people. It's just they don't have permanent addresses there.
That's right.
Wow.
So Sable Island.
I want to go now.
You want to go? Do you know why it's called Sable Island?
Well, I guess there's sand, sable.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's.
I think that at one point they tried to colonize it, but it didn't work out.
Well, I'm looking at the pictures. It's so thin, and also there's Can you imagine a storm there? It would be awful.
It just blows right over the whole thing. Okay.
Oh, there you go. But it's beautiful. Okay, it's things. Since there's no people, I want to go. So
Yeah, the internet's probably pretty bad though.
I can live without.
Yeah.
For a while.
Okay, so we're still amazingly, we're still waiting on results in 3 ridings.
Sackville,
Uniacke, which we
either
think will go PC. Clare, which is a Liberal incumbent, but
it'll go PC.
a lot of Liberal incumbents went down to defeat. So we're expecting, in neighboring Yarmouth.
And Glace Bay, yeah.
Glace Bay. So
okay.
that would put the PCs at 42, which would be that record that we mentioned. For the NDP, they're at 10, which is a good result.
Yeah.
So they're leading in Cape Breton Centre. That looks like they'll hold that. Cole Harbour was they're ahead by 100 votes. So that one, we'll see. Sackville Cobequid, they're ahead by 52 votes. So that's not a sure thing. Halifax Needham, they're going to hold on to that. They just haven't called it because enough votes haven't been counted. Halifax Armdale, it's only a 80 vote lead. And at Fairview Clayton Park, that one looks a bit safer. It's a 300 vote lead. So, maybe the NDP could still end up with 8 or 9, but they could end up losing some of these. So that's not a sure thing. And then for the Liberals, Ian Rankin, looks like he's going to be okay. He's ahead by nearly 500 votes.
Next Liberal leader.
Next Liberal leader.
Paul Robert Bourassa.
Yeah.
Can you think of other examples? We're joking, of course, but of people that were leaders, that were premiers, that were defeated, that stayed or came back and won again. There's not that many.
There's
right?
not that many. There's Robert Bourassa, like you mentioned.
Trudeau father, of course, but he
never left.
He left.
He never technically left. He said he was leaving.
John A. Macdonald.
Elizabeth May left.
That's true.
But she never became any prime minister. John A. Macdonald did come back to win, but he never gave up the leadership. I think there was some Ontario Liberals. Mitch Hepburn did that.
Hepburn came back.
But Hepburn was a bit of a character, so not surprising. He was pretty erratic. Aside from that, I'm not sure. Oh, we got our first results from Clare.
Okay.
And the Liberals are ahead. Ronnie LeBlanc, future Liberal leader. Very possibly.
Now that screws up my projection. Come on, man.
Oh, yeah, we don't want that.
No.
So it's only 3 out of 25. So we'll have to wait and see, but that could get the Liberals up to 3. That would be a bit of a surprise. Based on the trends across rural Nova Scotia, you wouldn't have thought that riding would buck the trends. But if it does have a significant Acadian population, then that could have a role in it. The other one with the big Acadian population, I think, is it Inverness or Richmond? Maybe it's Richmond. It was one of them in Cape Breton. The court said they need a separate riding or something like that. But anyway.
Clare. What was the score in Clare? So it was Liberal 40. It was 50% for the Liberals and 43% for the PCs. And so let's say the Liberals do hold on to Clare, they really bucked that trend. They did. The local effects really did not follow the provincial ones, because in all logic, with the numbers that we have, not only in the polls but we have tonight, the Liberals should not be able to win Clare unless with hyper local effects.
Yeah.
So,
well, if like I said, with the francophone population, that could make a big difference. Cassandra is suggesting I'm not sure if it's supposed to be pronounced LeBlance.
No, come on.
It could be. People can decide to choose.
Yeah, but we can decide how to pronounce it either.
Have anyone ever called you a Fournier? Or?
Yeah, of course.
Someone might. There's probably an American who's an ancestor of French Canadians who calls himself Fournier.
And some say Philippe. It's like it's the E is silent. It's Philippe, but it's fine. It's okay. Like Lac du Bonnet, right? We had this discussion last year.
Yeah, but I saw there was a whole report on what people call it. It's Lac du Bonnet or Lac du Bonnet.
For Manitoba people, this is an inside joke.
This is a recurring theme of the live streams. Philippe being upset that people don't pronounce things the way that he believes they should be pronounced. Language evolves, Philippe. It evolves.
That's right.
All right. Okay. Well, I think we are going to call it quits at 9:00. So we do have some time for some
questions.
We have some time for some questions, and then maybe we'll do some overall kind of thoughts on the results. Now, Claire has already moved over back to the PCs.
There you go.
And not even by a little bit. Robichaud is now ahead by 165 votes.
It's Robichaud. No, there's no D. There's no D. Okay, so he doesn't even write his name correctly. Okay.
Okay, wait a minute. Names are names.
I'm kidding.
The first Grenier came over. He was a Garnier, and then eventually decided to change
was it
it.
Garnier? It was.
Yeah.
It went. Okay, so he misspelled on his application, and you became Grenier.
Yeah. He was probably illiterate. Okay,
That
it
counts.
was the
counts.
1700s. Give him a break. Jeez, elitism here, centuries later.
Hey, my dad was my granddad was an asbestos miner in Thetford Mines that il déchiffrait sa terre en Abitibi. So yeah, I get it.
All right. Did he know how to write his name?
You know what? I'll get back to you.
Let's move on.
He's dead now. So
Yeah.
but
Okay. So all right. So yes. So anyway, that puts the PCs now at 41 seats. We're waiting.
Which is the 41st? There's something flipped here. An NDP flip. Which one is it?
Clayton Park West.
Bedford.
Did that flip?
Oh,
Cole Harbour.
Okay.
Which makes sense. Cole Harbour, if the NDP held on to that, I would have been a bit surprised.
By a big margin too.
Yeah, because the NDP seats I was looking at were the ones that they have, all the Halifaxes and the Dartmouths. And then Fairview, Clayton Park, and then Clayton Park West seemed like the next likely, and they're only behind there by 63 votes or so. I remember the last time that we did a live stream in 2021.
Yeah, I remember, and I was pissed
You did
off.
not enjoy it.
No, not at all. I was angry as hell.
The polls did bad because there were very few of them, which meant the projections did bad. But like tonight, it's like all going just as planned. There's
So
going to be
far,
very
it's, like,
very
perfect.
few. I have a feeling your error rate on this is only going to be what, 5 or 6%. There's not a lot of surprises here.
Well, the two Liberal seats that are right now Liberal, they're not called yet, and they're close, are the two that I had read.
Oh, really? Okay. I had Yarmouth and Sydney. I didn't have Timberley. Timberley was like my third to fourth riding.
So right now, there's no surprise whatsoever. The NDP doing a little. I had the NDP at 8 seats, and so there's two ridings that are still with 0 result. I think Sackville should be PC, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong about this?
Yeah.
Let me get that map. I learned a lot about Nova Scotia during this campaign.
Yes.
I had time to study.
Yeah, it was
I didn't.
fun.
It was only one election at a time, so it was time to study it and study the history. I learned a lot. It was very enjoyable. Yeah, in 2021, what angered me in 2021 is we had a léger poll a month before the election, right? And it had a Liberal lead, and the Liberals had been leading. They were in power, and they had been leading all the way. And then throughout, I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And then on a final weekend, we had one Main Street poll that showed a tie. It was 500 cases, so bad regionals, right? Well, not bad, but unreliable regionals. And so, what do you do with this? And what I should have done, in hindsight, was just pull out. It says we don't have enough data to have an accurate projection. And it blew my record. 64% of good calls in this election. My average is around 90.
Yeah.
So tonight it looks like redemption. I made peace with Nova Scotia again, and also we
that's
had all
nice.
these good polls.
Yes. Yeah, we did. And the polls, we'll see. It looks like they'll end up pretty close to where things are. The NDP, like the PC vote keeps on ticking down. I do wonder if they'll end up over 50. I think they will.
It looks like it. Yeah.
Based on where they are. The NDP has now moved ahead of the Liberals in the popular vote. And
By 40 votes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now it's 122. Come on.
Okay.
But anyway, that has been trending in that direction throughout the night, so it's probably going to continue. So it looks like the polls are actually going to do a pretty terrific job, depending on where the PCs end up. But for the NDP Liberal vote, it looks like it's going to be pretty close. There are still a couple of ridings you have to watch. Annapolis
Annapolis is close, huh?
it's only 30 votes for the PCs there. So the Liberals could end up flipping that. King South, PCs are ahead by a decent amount. Clare, the PCs are now moving ahead, so it looks likely they'll probably hold on to that. Churchill, I mean, time is running out for him. He's still 200 votes behind. And what else are we waiting to be called? Still haven't gotten a single result from Glace Bay Dominion.
That is strange, though.
That is strange. Cape Breton Centre, the NDP is comfortably ahead there. Sydney member 2. I mean, maybe the Liberals will hold on. So there are still some results that are going to have to wait. Preston, PCs are going to hold that. They won that in a by-election. Cole Harbour, PCs have moved ahead, which is kind of what you'd expect. And then you have these suburban ridings in Clayton Park and Bedford, and where are they going to go? So there still could be some things shifting around between now and the time that the voting finally completes. But I think we're probably looking at a pretty close to what the results will be.
Yeah.
Maybe 42 for the PCs. Maybe they flip a few more, get up to 44. The NDP probably going to end up at 8 to 10. It looks unlikely they can flip any of them.
But to go back to the polls, though, I mean, if the NDP ends up with 22%, they underperformed, but they still were very efficient by winning 10 seats.
Yeah.
And so the question I will have, and also I will test this with the model too, because I calibrate the model at every election, right? Thing is, let's say the polls did say the NDP would be at 22. I would have had them at 5 or 6 seats, not 10.
Yeah.
The average for the NDP was 25%. Now 22 is close, but that sweet spot between 22 and 25, there's a big difference. The Liberals appear to be falling exactly where we thought: 22%, 21% with 2 seats.
Yeah.
The PCs, yeah, they will be closer to that 52% mark than that 48, 47.
Yeah.
Like Abacus
probably,
and Forum called, but.
Yeah. I mean, there are still some votes to count in Halifax. Just looking at some of the ridings there. Like Halifax Needham, which is a pretty strong riding for the NDP, only 15 of 50 polls. So I think the NDP's vote's still going to tick up. So, maybe they'll end up at 23, 24. And the PCs will tick down a couple more points. But overall, I think this is going to be a pretty good result for the polls in, a smaller province. And so that's... always a bit more fraught. All right, so we're past 9 o'clock. We pretty much know exactly what's happening tonight. Why don't we make some final thoughts? Let's start with the Liberals. Disaster?
Yeah, it is a disaster, but they save face. And this is something that I said about the Ontario
Because of the
Liberals.
amount of vote they have, you mean?
That's the thing. They have more than a fifth of the vote, even if they're going down to 20%. They can rebuild off that. I mean, obviously they need a rebuild, new ideas, new people, new staff, new everything. And it's going to take probably more than one election. But the danger, and that danger was there, that they win 0 seats.
Yeah.
And it doesn't appear like it will happen tonight. They could go down to 1 if we look at the results.
Could go down to 1. Just looking at it, maybe they could flip... They could flip Annapolis and Bedford South, so maybe they could get up to 4. That's the best case scenario.
The danger was 0.
Yeah.
When you go down to 0 seat and you're outside the legislature, there's no coming back, right? So it's a disaster, but they could rebuild. It will depend on how well the NDP does in the opposition, and we know from other provinces and the federal that the NDP... They can self-fumble a few times. So we'll see how Miss Chender does. I mean, Miss Chender has good numbers. We'll see how well she does as leader of the opposition. And for Mr. Houston, he's got a strong mandate. But here's the thing, though. The second mandate is always harder than first. Ask François Legault just next door, right? Yeah. And now it's on you. That means that all the healthcare problems that you were complaining about 4 years ago when you won power... If they're not fixed in 2-3 years, you cannot blame previous governments. This is on you now. So you have a strong mandate. It can be a double-edged sword. But for now, July 29 will be the next election in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, I think for the Liberals, as you said, the results are pretty disastrous. They look a lot worse than they might be because in the seat count, because they're going to end up with a similar amount of votes as the Liberals, as the NDP, but end up with a fifth of the seats, which is very similar to what's happened in Ontario. I think the NDP can be pretty happy with the result because they'll probably end up. They're right now at 11 because the other Sackville riding came in and it's trending NDP early on, very early on. They're ahead by 3 votes, so let's let's not get ahead of ourselves here. But if they end up at 9-10 seats, pretty good result considering that the party's been stuck at 6 or 7 for the last few elections. Probably, maybe, we'll see once more votes are counted, they'll end up ahead of the Liberals in the popular vote. They're back behind them right now. But, for the NDP in Nova Scotia, not a bad result. And a very strong result for Houston, regardless of the fact that he's been in there for 3 years and he's still kind of a fresh premier a little bit. He is the incumbent. It's been kind of tough for incumbents. All the other 3 provincial elections saw the governing party lose seats, lose vote, and in one case lose power. In this one, he's getting over 50% of the vote. If you can get over 50% of the vote in any provincial election, that is an impressive showing. So a big result for the Houston PCs. Shows that the early election call was a good idea. Who knows what would have happened in the future. So we'll wait to see what's some more of these results in. We'll talk about them on our podcast on Thursday.
Yes.
We'll go over the complete results then. So if you want to join us, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. It's as little as $5 a month, actually less if you sign up for a year. We are planning to increase the prices at the end of December. So you can lock in a lower price right now. That would be a good thing to do. We'll have the episode on Thursday. We'll have the mailbag. We'll answer questions from our members. And I'm looking forward to that. We also have some other things to discuss, some federal polls that came out this past few days that we're going to have to go over. So I'm going to look forward to that. So
is that a dark red that I see? Yeah.
It is.
Ian Rankin is elected.
Yeah. They're calling him elected. So they're not going to get shut out. We'll see what happens. But so Philippe, wanted to thank you for tonight.
Merci beaucoup, Éric. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being there with us. We appreciate that. Our next live stream. Well,
next year.
we may see by-election in 20... We have a few by-elections in 2025, so we'll talk about this later. Merci beaucoup, Éric, and merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Bye, everybody.